Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Gaines for Girls podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Be sure to check us out at OutKick.com, anywhere where you get your podcasts. But at OutKick.com, you can follow all things Gaines for Girls and make sure you never miss an episode. On today's episode, we are talking to Kim Hermann. She is the executive director at Southeastern Legal Foundation. And we have partnered, and when I say we, I mean the Riley Gaines Center at the Leadership Institute. This is my center that was developed about a year ago that has done pivotal work in engaging and mobilizing and training up young conservative leaders. Really important stuff that we're doing over at the Riley Gaines Center. You can check that out at rileygaincencenter.org. But we have partnered with Southeastern Legal to create a Title IX training. I had people approaching me all the time. I think I know what Title IX is. I know it allows for girls to be able to compete equally in sports. But that's kind of my extent on, my extent of the knowledge I have on this issue. And so I was thinking, how can we broaden the amount of people who understand the severity of what we are seeing pushed by the Biden-Harris administration and the Democratic Party. And so we, like I said, partnered with them. This training is up. It is live. You can check it out at the rileygaincencenter.org. It is incredibly comprehensive. It goes into all things Title IX and the harm that's being done, that has effectively already been done. It talks about the free speech implications. It talks about due process, which adversely affects men, in a topic that we tend to forget to talk about. It talks about of course, what's happening in sports, but also in academics, how women are losing out on academic scholarships. It talks about what's going on in bathrooms and locker rooms and changing spaces and dorm rooms and sororities, all these places where people forget to think about when thinking about Title IX. So again, check out the training, take the training. It's not super long, but again, it's very important. Share the training. And be sure to share this episode with Kimberly Hermann. Well, Kim, thank you so much for joining the Gaines for Girls podcast. Super excited to talk with you about all things Title IX. We have had several people on this show. I mean, my whole platform really is built around protecting women's sports, really, protecting women, protecting common sense and sanity. But we've had attorney generals on to talk about it. We have had other legal representatives, but again, this is really important. And I think these are things that everyday people, everyday moms, everyday dads, this is what they need to hear. This is what they need to understand, the progressive policies that are being put in place by the people in the White House now. And if the same ticket or a Harris-Walz ticket were to win in November, certainly what they could continue to expect. And so very briefly, would you just introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, so everyone can have a little background on you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. So first and foremost, I'm a parent. I've got a 7-year-old girl and a 10-year-old boy. Both of them play sports. My daughter actually used to play baseball over with the boys before she could even start playing softball, right? Before she even aged into that program. And so big into athletics. And I know that as she grows up, she's going to look at really up to figures like you who are out there championing for their rights. And so first and foremost, like I said, I'm a parent. I'm also executive director here at Southeastern Legal Foundation. We are the country's oldest conservative public interest law firm. That is a lot to say, but at the end of the day, we are a pro bono organization, and we sue the government when it violates the rights of Americans. So specifically constitutional issues. Right now, we have lawsuits against the Department of Education challenging this Title IX rewrite that I know we're going to talk about today. We have lawsuits where we actually represent Leadership Institute because universities want to charge crazy fees for you to come and speak. And so we operate in the courtroom, and we also operate in the court of public opinion, putting out a lot of education on these topics.
No, that's great. And I think that's a good segue into understanding Title IX and the free speech implications. You mentioned, which my viewers don't really know this because I don't think this is something that I've talked about, but it's a big push of mine, of course, us at the Riley Gaines Center at the Leadership Institute to get on these college campuses, mobilize and engage the youth, my demographic, people who are in college, who are really desperate for the truth. So that's what we've done. I think last year I was on 45 different college campuses. Wow. It's ranging from Harvard, Princeton, Cal Berkeley. I mean, very much one extreme, and everything in between to, smaller private Christian schools. So definitely putting ourselves into the belly of the beast. A lot of people are familiar with the San Francisco State University incident. But what a lot of people probably don't know, we get on these college campuses, one campus in particular, University of New Mexico, where I was charged a ridiculous amount as a security fee for police to be present at the event because they had heard of protests, different things going on. They said they needed to be there, but they had to charge me and the Leadership Institute $10,000 to show up. Of course, this was inconsistent with what they have charged other speakers, specifically speakers who speak on more socially liberal topics. So you guys at Southeastern Legal helped us push back. We sued UNM. Can you talk about this lawsuit very briefly? Kind of the meat and potatoes of it and what the result of this lawsuit was.
Yeah, so the lawsuit's still ongoing, as you know, but at the end of the day, schools can't discriminate on the basis of viewpoint, right? Our First Amendment protects our right to speak, and what they were doing here with respect to you and Leadership Institute was blatant viewpoint discrimination. The schools were allowing drag queens. They had a huge event where they had drag queens from, I think, RuPaul's show or something like that come onto campus and do a drag show. No security fees were assessed. And then when you want to come on and speak about Title IX and speak about our rights and speak about why we need to fight back and raise awareness to this, like you said, they wanted to charge $10,000 to have, I forget if it was over 20 or 30 police officers, including an entire arresting unit there, which is absurd. And so we were able to get them down, but it was still an egregious amount that they charged. And so anyway, we filed a lawsuit. This is happening across the country. It's not new, but it's something that we have to continue to fight back against because they want to silence our voices. They don't want us talking about free speech. They don't want us talking about Title IX on campuses. Like, that's just the end result of it.
Right. Yeah. And it's important to note that's definitely not exclusive, this treatment, to just me. Ask any conservative speaker, ask Charlie Kirk, of course, over at Turning Point, what he has faced on college campuses. Very similar situation. But is this something, in terms of the stifling of speech, is this something that we can expect given the new Biden-Harris administration rewrite? What are kind of the changes to Title IX? What do these implications look like in the real world?
Yeah, so the implications truly cannot be understated. So just to kind of, for anyone listening, obviously, I'm sure they know what Title IX is if they're following your podcast. But if they don't, Title IX is a federal law that we've had in place for over 50 years that prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex. So it just ensures that all educational opportunities, whether it's athletics, extracurriculars, admissions, is available to women and girls. And what we've had now is we have the Biden-Harris administration coming in and trying to change the definition of sex. Sex, under their definition, now means gender identity. It means sex stereotypes. It means sex characteristics. They're changing the standard that would be applied to establish a violation of Title IX to a subjective standard. So now it's if anyone feels like they were subjectively offended, then they can file a Title IX complaint. What this is going to do is it's going to chill speech. It's going to force everyone to self-censor. Girls are going to be terrified to speak up about having to change or go to the restroom in front of boys. They're going to be terrified to speak up about having to sleep in overnight sleeping accommodations, whether it be in a dorm or on a field trip or something like that. And so they're going to be forced to self-censor, and the courts are finding this, right? It's not just us out here saying this. There have been 4 or 5 courts throughout this country that have already looked at this and said, yes, this violates the First Amendment.
Wow. Yeah, that's important for people to realize. What about, you mentioned kind of this locker room scenario. That's something that is allowed that is something that really is seemingly celebrated, I will say, in terms of how administrations and at the institutional level, how they treat this topic. And so is that something that this new rewrite would allow for? Bathrooms, locker rooms, changing spaces?
It won't just only allow it, it will require it. So in the 1970s, when Congress passed Title IX, they made sure that sex separate spaces, so our bathrooms, our locker rooms, everything that we just mentioned, that's preserved. So if a school has a boys' locker room and a girls' locker room, that would not be a violation of Title IX, putting their federal funding subject to risk, because they know that they have to protect physical safety. They have to protect our dignity and the dignity of our girls and our boys, right? My son doesn't want to be changing in a locker room with girls any more than my daughter wants to be changing in a locker room with boys. And so the new rewrite actually prohibits these sex separate spaces. And it also prohibits schools from asking for any evidence of, say, gender dysphoria. And so an example I use a lot is, say you have a 14-year-old daughter who has to dress out for PE. She goes into the locker room to change, and a boy comes in. She simply says, please don't change in front of me, or I'm going to go change over there. Anything to show her discomfort. He then can file a Title IX complaint against her because the standard is subjective, and she's commented on, say his physical characteristics or his gender identity, and the school now has to punish her. So he has completely turned Title IX on its head. That girl should be protected, right? She should be able to file that sexual harassment claim against the boy, and now he can take action against her. So not only has it changed the definition of sex, but it has completely undermined the intent, and it truly is putting our girls at physical danger risk of what's going to happen here.
I wish every single person could hear your response to that, hear your answer, because I mean, she's being punished for calling a spade a spade. It's very Orwellian when you lay it out like that, and when you understand it to be what they now intend and what it effectively is. And you mentioned men. I think this is really interesting because we talk a lot about girls and women, specifically in sports or in bathrooms or locker rooms, but men are affected too. And so specifically this new rewrite, outside of the locker room kind of situation, how else are men affected adversely by the new Title IX?
Well, I mean, their speech is silenced too. So you can imagine a kid in class, or in a young adult in class in college, and they simply say that they believe in the biological reality that there are two sexes, right? There are men and there are women. And they don't believe that there is a concept of gender identity. That could be a violation of Title IX. And so again, they could be punished for simply saying that. We really don't know where that bar is. And, when people come back on the other side and say, well, it's not going to go that far, I'll tell you that in open court, when the judge in our case specifically asked the Department of Justice attorney, can that situation happen, right? So will a boy be punished if they say that they don't believe in gender identity? Will a girl be punished if she says that she believes in the biological reality of sex? The Department of Justice attorney couldn't answer.
Wow.
So the judge there said, well, if they can't even tell us, then everyone's going to be forced to self-censor. And so again, that's why we've been able to stop these changes from going into effect in all 50 states. Our clients, Young America's Foundation and Moms for Liberty, have members across the country. And we've been able to stop this rule in every school where there's a member of those organizations.
That's huge. And definitely an incentive for moms to get involved with groups like Moms for Liberty. What about the due process side of this new rewrite? Again, I think a way that adversely affects boys and men. I can think of plenty of stories that have garnered national attention over the past few years of women who have accused men of some sort of sexual crime on a college campus. The men have been convicted only to find out later that they were wrongly convicted, and that these women were attempting to, I don't know if it's money, if it's attention, whatever it is. But this new Title IX rewrite, it impacts men in that way too, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad that you brought that up. Our Constitution requires that everyone get due process of the law. So basic things, right? Access to an attorney, the right to know what claims are being brought against you, the right to actually look at the evidence that somebody brings against you, whether you're talking in a criminal situation or with a sexual harassment complaint. During the Trump administration, the Department of Education took all of these due process requirements that our Constitution mandates, and they actually made a rule about them. For the very first time in the history of Title IX, everyone knew what rights they had if a Title IX complaint was filed against them. And if you were sexually harassed, you knew what you had to establish to actually get some relief. Well, the Biden-Harris administration has gotten rid of all of that. We have gone back to the kangaroo courts of the Obama administration. So sometimes a boy, you could have an 18-year-old kid, right? I say a kid, showing my age here, but an 18-year-old kid in college that actually goes to a fraternity party, and a week later, he gets slapped with a sexual harassment complaint. He doesn't actually get a copy of the complaint. He doesn't even know it's been filed against him. He doesn't have an opportunity to defend himself. He doesn't have an opportunity to see the evidence. He doesn't know until he gets an email saying that he is suspended or expelled from school. This happened during the Obama administration, and it's going to happen again during the Biden-Harris rewrite if we don't stop it across this country.
So during the Trump administration, was this a piece of Title IX that had been, I guess, affected for the better, and it ensured due process?
Absolutely. So after seeing a lot of the stories that you were mentioning, the Department of Education knew that they had to do something. During the Obama years, what we saw from the Department of Education was the creation of these kangaroo courts, right? Where the number of sexual harassment complaints being filed was skyrocketing because of whether it be fame or attention, right? It doesn't mean that some of these weren't incredibly valid and that these girls' rights need to be defended and that they needed relief. But we also saw that we never really knew because nobody was actually going through a proper process where due process was allowed for both parties. And so when Betsy DeVos became the Department of Education, the Secretary of Department of Education, they immediately went to work changing the actual regulations and making sure that these due process requirements were going to be codified and permanent. Never expecting that they would ever be controversial. Right? Because who doesn't want somebody to be properly defended? That's just a basic right. And somehow it became incredibly controversial and they've gotten rid of it now. So this, I'll be honest, this November, what happens through this election is going to have a huge impact on our college campuses and on due process rights for our boys and men throughout this country.
That's right. The phrase of any educational program that receives federal funding, to me that seems, I can think of other entities other than universities and public schools that receive federal funding. And so I guess what else does Title IX apply to? Does it apply to somewhere like a YMCA, for example?
So it potentially could, right? If those programs are educational opportunities, and it just depends on how it's funded. One area that it absolutely affects, and an agency no one would ever think, is the USDA, right? When we say this, people are like, wait, the USDA? How is it that they have to follow Title IX? And how is it that they now need to redefine sex to be gender identity? Well, in our K through 12 programs, lunch programs go through the USDA. And there's also a number of those situations at college. Across all of our federal agencies, we see grants that are made to our colleges and universities. This is going to impact all of those grants. And so any money that you're really seeing flow onto our college campuses, any agencies that money flows through are going to have to also de facto change the definition of sex to mean gender identity. And this is not by mistake. It was either on day 1 or day 2 of President Biden's administration. He issued an executive order where he told all of the federal agencies to go and get to work, changing the definition of sex to now mean gender identity and sexual orientation. And so he, as president, unilaterally changed the definition in all of our statutes and all of our regulations by just telling them to go get to work. And they all got the assignment, unfortunately.
So this wasn't done through Congress. this wasn't done through any of the necessary executive means to ensure. I have to imagine, of course, I'm someone with no legal background per se. I have lived experience on my side, and that certainly has helped me understand the harmful effects of this. But with no legal background, to me, this seems as if, this I would imagine is a large part in why we've seen now 26 states push back, suing the Department of Education for how this rewrite was produced, really. I mean, you said it yourself. I mean, this wasn't done constitutionally or legally, even, it seems.
It absolutely wasn't, right? And so we have to go back to what are our three branches of government, which unfortunately too many people don't even learn in school these days.
I was one of those who didn't learn.
I'm getting to teach a high school course next week. My government teacher from high school in the 90s now teaches at my kid's school. And he asked me to come in and teach on the Constitution next week. So I'm super excited. And we're going to be talking about Title IX, but I'm going to make sure they know the three branches of government. But, Congress is the entity that passes laws, especially here. They passed Title IX. There was no question about what the definition of sex meant. They pass our other laws. We now have a fourth branch of government that has been created by the executive branch, right? All of these federal agencies that just have so much red tape and that create the swamp that we need to be gone, quite frankly. But yes, Congress is the one who should be passing these laws. And instead, we have a president right now who came in and tried to do this by executive order. And the agencies went through it. And that's why we have to sue, right? Litigation is always the last thing that we should be doing. I always say that, right? But we have the federal courts for a reason. When we have to go to them, we're glad that they're there because then they can hold all these branches of government accountable.
Do you think legislation is necessary that, codifies these words that we've never struggled to understand, words like sex itself, or words like even woman? We've seen now, I believe it's 9 states that have passed a bill that does just this. And I know at the federal level, it's, I believe they call it the Women's Bill of Rights, but I think it's been undertaken by Representative Debbie Lesko and Diana Harshbarger. Is this legislation that would, it's crazy that that I have to say is necessary, but I think this could be a good thing for clarity, for transparency purposes.
Yeah, it 100% can't hurt, right? They can come back in and say, this is what we meant, and this is what the definition is. Hey, agency, this isn't an ambiguous term. You're not here to fill the gaps. There is no gap about what a woman is. There is no gap about what sex means. It means a man or a woman. Now, whether or not they can get that passed, well, that's beyond my pay grade here. But whenever our legislatures can come in and further define these terms, then it can only help when we have to litigate. Of course, you run the risk in blue states of them making the definition something absolutely absurd. But at the end of the day, that is why we have a federalism system. That is why we have 50 states. We have seen a heck of a lot of people making, their views known just by moving. And so, I at the end of the day, we all know what women means. We all know what men means. But to have that further defined by Congress, it takes that even ability away from the agencies then.
That's right. Yeah, we all know what a woman is, but it's time our laws do, I guess.
Yeah.
Southeast has been just, foundational really in spreading awareness of the issue, how to talk about it, why it's important. You guys partnered with the Leadership Institute, the Riley Gaines Center at the Leadership Institute, and created a Title IX training. I was able to, after this training had been drafted and created, I was able to take the training to learn from the training. The graphics, the videos, the guides that are put out are really just amazing. I learned so much. I considered myself somewhat of again, not from the legal perspective, but somewhat of an expert on Title IX, what it did, what it meant for me as an athlete. But gosh, I learned so much. And so can you just take a minute and explain the training and what people can expect from it, how to access it?
Yeah, this was a fun training to do because I think that for people to understand Title IX, they have to first understand like where you're coming from, right? And your lived experience, that they actually understand that this is such an important issue. And so, of course, we start the training with your story and you being able to tell everyone, that watches it, how this has impacted you. And then, we just do our best to walk anyone that's going to take it through what Title IX is, the history of it. Because if you're going to try to understand how a law impacts you and how these changes violate your constitutional rights, you have to kind of understand where we've been and you have to start with the text. And so we walk everyone through that, and we walk through the due process implications that we've talked about here, the First Amendment implications that we've talked about here, and try to give everyone an idea of where they can go on their college campus to actually get more information. So how can you learn about what your school's policies are on Title IX? How can you advocate that your school maintain a reality definition of sex? How can you then also protect yourself if you're in a situation where you're in a locker room and a male comes in and you want to tell them that they can't be there because you don't want to have to undress in front of them or see them undress in front of you? So we just try to give everyone some real life experience, or use real life experiences to kind of really train them up on their legal rights and then empower them to go out there and advocate and spread the word. And we're coming out with a guidebook that comes with this training also, that's available on the website. And that's something that we just hope that people give to everyone else, right? Send that out to somebody who's never heard about Title IX and get them up to speed on it also.
Absolutely. I implore school board members, I implore moms and dads. I mean, the training is even suitable for those young high school female athletes who might not understand the issue, know it's wrong, know it's unfair and unsafe, the issue specifically of men competing in women's sports, but want to know what they can do about it. The training is suitable for you too. You can find it at RileyGainesCenter.org. Again, RileyGainesCenter.org. I encourage everyone to go check it out, not just to see the training, but we mentioned getting on college campuses. That is something that is certainly continuing through the rest of this semester. I believe I will be on 17 different college campuses over the next 40, 45 days. So everyone can check that out, see if me or some of the Riley Gaines Center ambassadors are coming to a campus near you. Please go check that out. Again, RileyGainesCenter.org. Last question for you. I mean, what other issues are you guys seeing government overreach on that Southeastern Legal is pushing back on? What about student loan debt? I mean, a lot of these, I think a lot of what we see around us is government overreach. But what are some of the other issues that you guys are pushing back on?
Yeah, I mean, any given day, I can be working on a case where we're suing the Department of Labor or the USDA over, like you said, a litany of overreach. But in the educational area, one thing that I think people have forgotten about is the fight to stop critical race theory in our K through 12 schools and on our college campuses. We have several lawsuits, a big one representing a teacher up in Evanston, Illinois, where the school actually engages in mandatory segregation. They put the white people in one room and the non-white people in another room. And then they talk to them about racial issues and how to bring those issues into the classroom. Racial segregation has been unconstitutional and illegal in this country since 1954 and should have been long before that. And so the fact that this is happening in a school today is something that we're trying to bring awareness to. People have kind of they've stopped talking about this issue. And so we're trying to bring that back to light and trying to stop it in the courts of law.
Amazing. Well, all very important in protecting and maintaining the innocence of children. Something that I would imagine and I would have hoped that all of us could agree on, but unfortunately, that's not the reality that we live in. And so we appreciate you, Kim, everything that you're doing, what Southeastern Legal is doing, and pushing back really for common sense policies. And so thank you very much. And thank you for joining the Gaines for Girls podcast.
Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, thank you for tuning in to the Gaines for Girls podcast. Be sure to check out OutKick.com. Again, share this episode, share it to someone, your favorite liberal who you think needs to be educated on what the Democratic Party and the Biden-Harris administration and what a Harris-Walz administration would continue to do to Title IX. Share this with them if they have a young daughter or a young son, for that matter. Really, really important stuff. You can check out the training at RileyGainesCenter.org. I encourage you to do that. You will also be able to see a list of ambassadors of the center, other girls who have faced similar, if not really the same situation that I found myself in. Myself and these ambassadors were getting on college campuses. You can find that list on the website. Hopefully I am coming to a college campus near you. I would love to see you there. But again, that's at RileyGainesCenter.org. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you next week on the Gaines for Girls podcast. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching. The fight to save women's sports and restore common sense is far from over, and I continue the conversation every week. So make sure to catch more content over here and subscribe to OutKick so you don't miss a thing.